Hello and welcome to this new course. This is a 6-hour crash course on the Benko for Black. This is Grandmaster Jacek Stopa from Poland, and I will be walking you through this course that is captured in 10 chapters. We'll be delving into just about every variation, every line that sort of matters in this particular opening. Of course, Benko is considered one of the sharper openings in the game of chess, and it still stands even with all the engines running around. But it is important to know how to adapt, let's say, compared to things that would happen here in this opening around 10 years ago. So so basically we'll be looking at some cutting-edge theory and ideas, mostly meant for club players, but I believe that just about everybody could grab some kind of value in this course. And we will start here with chapter 1, in which we consider the move Queen C2, and basically the less known moves as well. And then basically we'll be making our way into the more popular territory. So D4, Knight F6, C4, C5, this is the Benko, D5, B5. This is where it starts technically, right? Of course, as here we also have the Benoni, and that is E6, and of course that is a very, very separate opening. So B5, yeah, this is the proper actual start of this opening, the Benko Gambit. Why is the Gambit? Well, we're giving up a pawn. It can be an accepted Benko or CB, and then, we follow up by A6, and they capture, it's an accepted Benko Gambit, or they can kind of stand still here and choose, let's say, one of these moves, and there's, of course, more of them. So that is the declined, Benko Gambit declined, okay. Queen C2 is our main consideration of this particular chapter, and we will be getting to it in just a couple minutes. First, let's take a look at some of the less popular options, and those include the move Knight C3 and a few more. Let's start with Knight C3, which is quite rare, but nonetheless, it is logical b4, and the whole point is to play this move Knight A4. It's not as bad as it looks. White is sort of like voluntarily placing the knight on a pretty bad square, relatively speaking. Knights are known to be bad on these like last files, like A and H. And but white kind of like has a purpose here, and we'll see it in just a second here. Of course, Knight B5, which may ring a bell, compared with some kind of like Knight C3 on a later move. This time it just happens to be a total blunder. You just grab a piece and win the game. So Knight A4, D6, and G3. We can already kind of get a feeling of what White's purpose here is. White's idea is to somehow try to take advantage of this diagonal. We, for now, play G6, Bishop G2, and now I believe the most precise option here is move A5, although engines like Bishop G7 as well, just as much. But Knight G7, Bishop G7 does allow these complications there, and I believe there really is no point to enter those. So A5, because Bishop G7 runs into this Knight C5, Queen C7 is, playable here. You're very welcome to kind of explore it on your own, but I believe there is no point to give a White this, pleasure of like, entering their prep. Clearly, if they play this Knight A4 idea, they probably know everything about this position. So, the point is just kind of like not to allow it and, not give them what they want. So, just to kind of show you that DC5 with D6 also is playable after Queen D6, takes. There's a very nice compensation here for the exchange, as the C4 pawn is weak, because there's this problem. It's kind of a bishop F5 that the rook tries to avoid, and get some B3 done. And, just to show you a couple of moves, like, yeah, A3, we have this powerful move B3, but these positions are so complex, and there's really no point to enter any of this, even though objectively it's, roughly equal. So the easiest way, in these kind of sidelines, to kind of prove them innocuous is just to basically play A5 here, E4, and now White is kind of back to some regular style setups here. He's trying to go very heavy here. We actually can capture this time, because D6, like basic move rook A7, rook A6, Black is doing great. So Fe, Knight D7, E6, Knight B6, exclam, and the positions become very, very comfortable. If White is trying to really kind of roll the pawns forward, ignoring all the basic principles, like we're basically almost winning here. That's logical and easy to see enough. So here, and knight f3, fe actually, delivers also quite good position here with bishop e6 in the game Gonza Whittaker Vienna 22-3. Black had no problems. There's some compensation, of course, for white. This pawn is kind of like, sticking out and is not very advanced as a passer and is most likely going to turn into a weakness. But I don't think white can count on more than just like, equality here. It's not a very serious compensation. So that is not a very scary move. There's some other options here. Let's see bishop g5. Quite an innovative idea here, trying to give up this bishop in some way. Otherwise, this idea would be sort of confused. And let us take a look. Let's say h4 defending it. Now we can afford to play queen a5, knight d2. This kind of a setup is popular even in some, like this may remind you of a Tremposky, actually, d4 bishop, d4 knight f6, bishop g5, some kind of c5, d5, knight e4, h4 idea. It looks like a kind of a regular transition, except the pawn there is there on c2. But there's definitely resemblance. If you happen to be a versatile player, you'll definitely know what I'm talking about here. But in this particular version, we get to play bc4, queen c2. Now we grab the bishop. So I think, if knight d2, then bishop will capture and come to c3. And that may feel uncomfortable, making it difficult for our Benko bishop to come out to this diagonal. So we grab the bishop and play g6, something you'll see, all the time in these kinds of positions. e4, bishop g7, bishop c4, d6, f4, knight d7, knight f3, rook b8. So very, very nice play here. Black is ready to counterplay with everything he's got, which is kind of a recurring theme in all of the Benko. Knight b6, bishop a6 coming up here. And yeah, so basically this position really, gives black more than enough play. I believe it's roughly around 0-0 here, as shown by Stockfish. And but of course, 0-0 these days has just a million meanings. It doesn't really, mean all that much by itself. So the familiarity with a position is basically number one thing, where we need to kind of be aware of all the plans and what to do in particular positions. And this really is not all that scary, let's say, compared to some of the other lines that white has at his disposal. So here black will definitely get all the piece play, and that's basically again the key here. Rook b1. Now I like this move, h6. So we kind of like alleviate some of the pressure here after all these exchanges. Knight b6 with fantastic counterplay here, all around the place, mostly on the queen side. It is equal pawns here, and we do get a lot of pressure down this diagonal. Like white doesn't have a dark square bishop, and black also gets all this pressure. Maybe bishop a6 is coming up as well. So this position really is very, very nice. There's also some more fancy ways for white to try to give up this piece and then recapture it, of course. One is knight d2, knight g5 and h4, and now I believe this knight back to e4 in this particular case is the best move here. Takes bc4, but this is white's idea. He's trying to basically play h6 if we play g6. So g6 runs into h6, we gotta be careful. White is being very, very sneaky, but that is why we kind of like, postpone that all the same. And if h6, we're just gonna capture that pawn. So d6, knight f3, knight d7, another Benko style move. Knight fd2, rook b8. Yeah, something, again, you see all the time. It's a semi-open file. The rook really has to grab it. Knight c4, knight b6, counterplaying. e3 takes, and queen a5, forcing the king onto f1. And now g5, I believe, is the most attractive move here. So we don't really just go for the pawn here, which I guess is also fine, but I believe development just matters much more, and this g5 is kind of an aggressive way to make a stamp here. So let's say knight g5 will run into h6, knight f3, and now bishop g7, basically sealing the lot of this pawn here. If rook b1, bishop f5 now, and basically, we try to just grab whatever we can. This position is equal, very, very good for black. We managed to, recapture the pawn, but also develop our king side. And if the sacrifice happens, yeah, this again is very, very good for black after rook g8, rook h4, bishop h6, counterplaying on all fronts, queen b1, trying to get some kind of play here for the exchange, and then takes, and king f8, I think is very, very good. If white is really going for it, we have queen a2, rook f4, check, another check, and queen g7 basically is winning. So black is doing really fantastic, in some of these lines. So that is not scary at all here. If h6, we basically play rook g8, and we're getting ready for rook g6, but very, very unclear position. And I encourage you guys to go deeper here. We really don't have the time to, again, consider just about each and every single possible offshoot of every line, that just geometrically shoots up to a number that is not feasible for human being to remember. So, we're trying to basically mostly overview the ideas that are out there, and I hope you guys, get enough of them to secure your own play. So that was the move knight d2, and there's also queen c2, yet another flavor of this version of this variation. Knight g5, h4, g6, takes bishop g7, knight d2, bc4, knight c4 castles, rook d1, e6, queen e4, takes, queen c7, e4, knight c6. So very nice development. This particular center will be a little bit reminiscent of another sideline we'll see in the near future. There is the move, in the accepted cba6 b6 move. We'll see something of this kind as well. Knight f3, and basically white hasn't castled yet. And that is the key. We can allow ourselves all these kind of fancy, actions here. On the queen side, now bishop c3 check and bishop b4 forcing the queen here. Knight a5 with basically equal position. Yeah, this position is quite pleasant, but it is also much more on the unclear side rather than sort of a dry equality. White may get something like this, and we really need to be ready with some serious play. So these positions are not without poison. And yeah, but this is basically very kind of a rare variation. We don't have to spend too many resources and time on this particular move. It is actually very, very rare. F3 is another possibility here, and there's also CB, A6, and then F3, and we'll take a look at that as well. So this F3 move, is kind of a maybe Zemish style, trying to, maybe get some sort of a position from the Zem, like a King's Indian style position. That's basically what I'm referring to, the Zemish variation of the King's Indian. And yeah, so that's kind of White's plan here, but it is not scary at all, as we'll see as well. So f3 and b4. Yeah, this will be our recipe to a lot of these sidelines. I think it's just about the most effective way to play. If bc, White will basically be able to play e4 and then establish the bishop on c4, followed up by knight c3, and basically have like a lot of central pressure. That is basically what we're going to try to avoid by posing these b4 moves that are not only not allowing the bishop on c4, but also taking away the c3 square from this knight. So knight h3, g6, knight f2, bishop g7, e4, and d6. And this really is not as good for white as some of these Zemish lines with this knight h3, knight f2 idea. Black already has a ton of fortification here, and very advanced pawn on b4, and is ready also to play the move e6, which will be featured here in this line as well. a3 castles, bishop d3, and note that this is not particularly scary. This ab4 basically runs into cb, and white gets this semi-open file, but it's not all that good. And the c5 outpost will be used by our knight in in the near future there, maybe even fortified by the other guy, maybe queen c7 move. So basically the play is quite comfortable there as well. Bishop d3 we can support with a5 castles, and now e6, another standard very way to play. Bishop g5, knight bd7. We're not afraid of de. We'll just follow it up with fe6, and this type of position also will come again here shortly. knight d2, queen c7, queen c2, a4, rook a1, now e d5, c d5, and maybe this b3, queen c1, knight b6 with very, very much equal position. Both-sided play, of course, but black is quite comfortable. It looks like a very, very good Benoni. We can, try to get c4, some kind of a bishop a6, put a rook on c8, and if we can get the pawn to c3, that's basically likely a winning, advanced middle game or end game. So again, here, very, very comfortable. That was actually the move f3 again, sorry. So f3, b4, right, again, knight h3, and this was our idea. Very, very straightforward setup that we'll see throughout all of this chapter, including the queen c2, like basically this b4, combined with a quick development here, g6, bishop g7, castles, and a5, d6, e6, or e5 are the recurring themes in all of this chapter. So that's basically one thing to kind of remember. And basically that completes our move f3, and leading up to this e4, that's kind of cutting into this chapter. So e4, yeah, this is basically, I believe, like not as straightforward, not as full-blooded of a response as the other guy, as the other moves here. We basically grab this pawn, knight f3, d6. I don't think there's like that much of a full compensation. Black is just kind of too comfortable, in my personal opinion, in this particular line. That's why I put a dubious mark on this particular try from White's perspective. cb5. And now we play g6, a4. And so one thing to go wrong here is this bishop g7, and a5 could kind of like give white too much here. Bishop d3, knight c3, and this is an example of a plus over equal. Well, he managed to kind of like push us out out of the perspective here on the queen side with these fantastic pawns, ab, kind of like controlling all of these crucial squares. Now a6 runs into b6, and that's a scary pawn to play against. There's just not enough counterplay here. So yeah, there's one way to kind of go wrong here. Of course, there's a ton of them. You always needs to be careful. But a6 is a timely way to counterplay on this b5 pawn, and this is basically what will secure the relevant counterplay. Bishop d3, now we go peacefully back. Knight c3, bishop g7. Castles, castles. Yeah, I think this position is just more than comfortable. Rook e1, ab5. White may kind of miss this central pawn, and in this particular variation, yeah, bishop b5, knight a6, bishop g5, and we just basically play simple h6, forcing this kind of trade. Bishop f6, queen d2, and I like this particular approach. And now White basically realizes he's completely out of counterplay, out of kind of active play here, and I think it's like it will be on Black to kind of establish very active moves with knight b4, bishop f5, moves like queen a5, things like that with this powerful bishop. That's basically why I put this dubious mark on this e4 move. I just think, this is just not enough for White. Queen h6, bishop g7, queen g5, now simple move, rook a7, h3 and knight b4 with a wonderful counterplay. Note we also will get these really cool moves like e5 or e6. Just really kind of putting a lot of pressure now on White. And with these two bishops, let's say this bishop gets to be established on e6, and then this can turn very, very badly for White. In this particular move. So again, that was this move e4, and now we're ready basically with the main stuff here of this particular chapter, and that is the move queen c2. So now off to the very, very juice of this particular chapter, queen c2, and b4. So like I mentioned already, this is our recipe to a lot of these sidelines. So it's kind of easy, nice and easy to remember. We just played b5, and now if we are allowed to, we are basically pushing the pawn forward. Again, we're taking away this usual square for the knight, and that's the square c3. We are kind of like, one drawback of this move, we're leaving a strong center supporting pawn c4. But, I argue it's not that much of a concern for us here. compared to the benefits we get for this move. So e4 is the way to play d6, and now basically we are left with these options, all of them quite legitimate. Mostly f4, I think, is one of the more challenging options here, but actually all of them can present some challenge. So it's actually necessary to be, familiar with all of these moves. So let's just basically get to it. Start with the move knight f3, which is perhaps the least pointed of them. Knight f3, and now our usual way to play suffices. g6, h3, bishop to g7, bishop d3, castles, castles, a5, and basically, this is our fortification. We are very, very familiar with this, at this point, obviously, basically, black is just trying to get this like very nice and pleasant play on the queen side. If he's allowed, if we can try to push it further with a4, a3, that would be really incredible. But of course, white will not allow us, everything as we please. So a3, kind of a standard tension dynamics, trying to be maybe sometimes aggressive. Well, this kind of an option, and white's idea often is to try to play a, b, c, b, c5. To basically undermine black's ability to counterplay in the center, and basically, promote his own agenda with these two central pawns. And we'll actually see some of these positions that are very, very pointed, very, very sharp, where there is both-sided counterplay. White does get to accomplish this strategic objective and obtain these two very, very dangerous pawns. But we also see how, of course, how black gets to counterplay that and keep balance in those sharp waters. Knight a6, bishop e3, e5 here, I believe is more than enough for counterplay. So it may look a little bit strategically off just because we're locking our own bishop, but we are establishing a very, very strong center after we have secured the queen side. So after AB, we'll most likely be recapturing AB as well, or if we can, CB with knight d7, knight c5 idea. And of course, we need to be careful about any c5 tries. So AB is the safer recapture. Then we basically are fine here on this file. We can play knight h5, f5 in the King's Indian style, and note that white is not as active on the queen side, where white usually tries to grab the counterplay in those main King's Indian classical lines. Of course, it's white who should have the pawn here on b4, a4, a5, and c5, but meanwhile, we have managed to dominate basically the vast majority of the queen side, and now we're ready to play on the king side. So that is very, very nice for us here. And now let us turn our attention into the more ambitious ways for white to play, rather than this move knight f3, which is a little bit soft. A3. So a3 is actually something that white will try here, quite a bit. This move has been played before many times, and is one of the standard ways to kind of like grab some kind of initiative, justifying this move queen c2. a5, I think the most precise way to play. I believe some people recommend ba, but I like this particular approach much better. a5, ab4, cb4, c5, and we basically allow it in this particular version, and we can afford to play this move dc5. Basically capture, and invite white to, try some of these tricks here. So bishop b5 is the move, bishop d7. Note queen c5, basically will run into knight e4. So, white cannot do everything here, and e5 runs into knight d5. So this is basically the whole idea here, bishop d7 and bishop c4. Again, I don't think there's a way to play bishop d7. Knight bd7 would control all of these moves, and then basically black manages to stay up a pawn and also control white's counterplay. That's related to moves like e4, e5, trying to put, cramp the position up here. But basically black manages to, again, capture all these squares. If these pawns cannot get rolling, then there basically is not much of a counterplay for white, who still has to solve these basic problems of development. So, but this is the idea. Now there needs to be care exercised. Can we or cannot we, play this particular move? And actually, yes, we can. Why? Because e5 basically is not all that scary. I think it runs into bishop f5, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just port my here a4. Yes, and we do get enough here. Yeah, with this, a very, very nice play. Fantastic compensation here for the piece. And, white basically will be in big trouble. We have this knight b6 idea coming after castling. Yeah, so this position is very, very good for us. Just a very standard Benko style counterplay. And materially, basically, here, almost even, but there's lasting pressure. So there's very, very good play here as well. So e5, bishop f5 is featured quite a bit. It's a very, very natural way to counterplay this attack. Knight f3, trying to strengthen first. Bishop g7, now e5 again runs into this move. Bishop b5, knight fd7, queen e2, and castles. We're on time with just about every single idea here. Knight d2, and now knight b6 is the key with big advantage, and things will start falling. Likely beginning with a pawn on d5, which really is just not able to support itself here in this particular line. So white is trying to grab too much too early and just gets punished by a very, very swift counterplay. Castles, then we basically go simple. Now again, note e5 runs into bishop f5. Bishop f4, knight e8, very important. Let's say if knight e5, if e5 now, then bishop f5. We need to knight d7. We're ready with moves like knight b6 on the bishop, knight c7, and again, here actually there is enough play for white for the sacrificed material, for the sacrificed pawn. So it is important to be kind of aware. Knight h4 is kind of an unpleasant move to face. We grab this knight, just so we kind of like this knight is hanging in the air right now. Rook a b1 and knight b6. So note, these positions are very double-edged. I'm not arguing that black is just like winning all the way throughout all these chapters. They'll basically take away all of the possible sense out of the move queen c2, which, is a legitimate continuation, and there's a lot of very, very strong players out there trying this with white. So, we're looking for feasible, best possible ways to play, or good enough ways to play, or feasible ways to play for black that are very, very legitimate in themselves, but note that white can have, a lot of dangerous ideas on his side as well. So rook fd1, knight c7 with counterplay. Let's say d6, we take, queen h4, g3, and now there's this cool sacrifice here, knight c4 with very, very imbalanced position resulting. Takes, knight e6 with extremely sharp and basically double-edged play here. So, you can lose it, you can win it. Very, very sharp, very tactical position resulting. And yeah, so basically, you're kind of on your own. I cannot really predict the entire game for you, of course. So yeah, here's where a position is good, and you probably need some kind of a personal input, of analysis on your own as well. So yeah, and so we basically considered both of these options here, e5 running into this particular move, this particular variation, but also we just took a look at the move castle, which is a little bit more of a long-term play for white, postponing this e5 idea, and e5 is not as scary as it looks. How about knight bd2? Well, now we play knight d6 with super unclear position as well. Now white will basically not be able to capture, obviously, that would be a total travesty here. And otherwise we get this great counterplay. We want to maybe grab this bishop, play bishop f5, and then again knight d7, knight b6, trying to jump onto this d5 pawn as fast as we can. So great counterplay, great position. Again, unclear position here. Bishop d7, knight d7. So again, this we considered already. And that is the move a3. So again, one of these top choices for white here, as we considered the somewhat tame move knight f3, which doesn't pose much trouble. a3, the kind of aggressive move, which is leading to some positions that are really kind of like all-in choices, to use poker terminology. From the white's perspective, trying to basically put the board on fire here. Yeah, so and now we're off for these other options: b3, g6, bishop b2, another very logical option, trying to contest the black Benko bishop here, and basically place the counterpart, the white's counterpart, dark square bishop here on this diagonal. But that of course takes time of its own, and black is more than quick to use this time. f4 castles, knight f3, knight bd7, leading to another very, very kind of a main position, I would say, with a ton of ideas. Bishop e2, then e5, this amazing way to counterplay, de, then fe, castles, e5 again, with a very, very nice play here. Like basically, the white's problem in these positions is the pawn structure and the undeveloped knight on b1, the undeveloped rook on a1. We're trying to open the center, try to create play as fast as we can. Knight g5, let's say, queen e5 and f5. This may look a little bit scary, but now we got more than enough time. After there's some locking here, so kind of a semi-closed position, we can afford to remaneuver the knight onto the dream square on d4. Knight d2, knight c6, rook a1, bishop h6, h4, bishop d7. Very unclear position again. So yet another unclear position here. And there's a ton of them coming up as well, of course. So that is bishop e2. A quick story of the move bishop e2. Bishop d3 is not as fortunate because there's this bishop h6 idea, g3, and now e5, fe, and this powerful move knight g4. He continues to capture. Now we have f5 with excellent counterplay. No, there's no way to establish any of this kind of a battery here on this diagonal because of our incredible pawn formation, taking away all these crucial squares from white, not enabling any of these kinds of moves either. So we're catching all the key squares. We're ready for fantastic play and initiative related to this move knight e3 as well. The king hasn't castled yet. So yeah, this is really, really great way to counterplay. There's f4 idea as well, trying to basically rip apart all of white's position. And yeah, so very uncomfortable for white to play here. And then there's also this move, knight bd2, which I believe is the main try, kind of like keeping black guessing here as to whether white wants the bishop out here, maybe even the very exotic like fianchetto, which I think usually takes too much time, as this really is kind of a race here for the central control and piece development in this particular variation. And also the queenside control, as we'll see now in just a second. a5, I think, is the basically main reaction. Now a3, rook e8, preparing e6 or e5, again keeping now white guessing as to what black's intentions are. g3, then e5 with really, really great play. Black is just basically ready with all of the main moves here, and that will be getting very, very positive versions of all of those positions we've seen. So e5, again, now basically taking over the initiative and attack, and slight advantage objectively for black. If a b4, of course we take with a cb4. There's a pin here on the a pawn. But now we're catching the c5 square, so it cannot be too bad for us. And actually, it is actually much better right away after knight c5. That is why a b4 is kind of a dubious, even more, maybe even a question mark. So this idea is absolutely not scary at all, this a3 move. Bishop e2 is more of a move here. And now we can afford to grab the queen side. ba, knight b6, with very unclear position again. So these are the ways to play here when white is trying to seize the center with this f4 move here. And now we'll turn into the very, very main line here of queen c2, and that is the move f4 on move 6. Yeah, this is the most challenging, I would say, out of all of these options that we considered. And we basically, but the key is that we are not afraid of this move, and we can afford, and very much so even, to play our very, very standard setup. So that's the first and number one thing to remember. that we can do this even against quick f4. Let's say he goes for quick e5, now go knight fd7, knight f3, bishop g7, bishop d3, and now we basically take this pawn. So yeah, so this position is also totally fine. Castles, yeah, this one is kind of challenging, and this I haven't seen this used too much in practice, but if I were to be forced with white to play this particular line, I think this is probably the move I would choose with white. So now this sacrifice seems to make a lot of sense, and there's going to be a hot area of research, I believe, in the near future in this like Benko offshoot sideline that will require just a ton of attention, for the black players to make sure that they can survive this particular idea. So ef4, bishop f4, castles, knight bd2. I'm just making a very modest contribution. I think this is the safest setup. Knight f6, rook ae1, knight bd7, knight e4, and this is very, very unclear. But again, there's some moves like knight f2, keeping tension, posing pressure here. Knight eg5, I think, is an idea. Yeah, so this definitely is compensation for white and deserves a very, very deeper, much deeper consideration. But because it hasn't been played much in practice, I'm not going to devote too much time into it. We have much more pressing concerns ahead of us. So yeah, but this is, yeah, again, definitely I'm trying to underline this point here that, yeah, this could be played, against you by somebody who's like very, very on the prepared side. So yeah, it's a very interesting sacrifice. But what has been played is this f5 move. Now we go e4 exclam, bishop e4, knight f6, bishop d3, castles, and this move, which I think is even recommended in the Perunovic on the modern Benko book from I think 2019 or 17. Yeah, so this exchange leads to nice complications for black. Knight c6 unclear, and I think this is kind of more on the pleasant side. It's actually trading off all of these pawns and obtaining this d4 square without a d5 pawn is beneficial for black because there's more than enough play here on the queen side. The e5 knight d4 ideas can be quite pleasant, or knight g4. Yeah, black kind of gets more freedom, and white of course has this perennial problem with this development of these queen side pieces. Yeah, so this is the main stuff here again. Knight f3, then bishop g7, bishop d3 castles, a little bit reminiscent of the lines we've seen already, and the play is very similar, except we don't go knight d7 if white just puts everything on the of the king side development and plays it as fast as he can. I think we're mostly good with the move e6. H3, let's say, yeah, he doesn't have a way to kind of put us, in some kind of a very unpleasant pressure here. H3, now we can afford to take, play A5, and this will be more into a kind of a Benoni or the four pawns attack in the King's Indian, some kind of position of this kind. Knight C4, Knight B6 with counterplay, Bishop D2 and Bishop A6. So super simple play. This knight is away from C3, so it's not easy to play E5 because of the weakness on D5. So you're going to be cognizant of all of those strategic maneuvers going on here. But suffice it to say, it's the engine kind of gives another 0-0, throws in here, and yeah, position is more than comfortable, especially for kind of a King's Indian player or a Benoni player. In this game from last year, Mestel Vignesh, Berlin 22-3. So this again a very nice and pleasant position. And again, thank you very much. This was Grandmaster Jacek Stopa from Poland. We're off with the first chapter of our 6-hour crash course on the Benko with black, where we have considered the very, very rare lines. The basic was the title, the chapter's title here is Sidelines Part 1. These are sidelines because they're kind of the declined Benko gambit. They're not CB, onto which we get later on in this course. And then there's the very rare lines, and again those include these exotic moves here on move 4. So thank you, and we'll be off for the next chapter, chapter 2, in the next video.